God, it's another history book. Where's it gone? Hi everybody, I hope that you're all doing really well. So today I am back to talk about some books that you might never have heard of. So this was very much inspired by Grace over at GK Reads. She did a video which was titled the very same thing, Books You've Never Heard Of, in which she went into her Goodreads account and instead of organising it by the average rating, so the number of stars on average that people rate a particular book, she actually decided to go through the number of ratings instead and decided to take a little bit of a peek at the books which are a little bit more niche that not many people seem to have read. And I thought her video was really fun, really interesting to see what books that she had read that nobody else seemed to have read. In fact, I don't think any of the books that she mentioned I'd even heard of, so I think it's really interesting to see what are the slightly more niche books on your Goodreads shelf. So I am just going to be shamelessly copying the same format. I am going to go onto my Goodreads account, sort it by number of ratings, and then let's see what comes up. Okay, so I've got my Goodreads up, sorting by number of ratings. So wow, this is just a lot of history books basically. Alright, something that is coming up with some of these books that have low ratings is that it's not that the book is a little bit more niche or an author that people don't know, it's just that maybe a particular edition isn't as widely picked up as others. So for example, there is a Bronte sisters poetry collection which I have, which I think is a slightly newer one, so that's been logged onto Goodreads but nobody else has picked it up. The same thing with the Lord Byron and the Percy Bysshe Shelley poetry collections that I've been reading over the past 2 months. I mean, like, it just happens to be that those particular editions haven't been picked up by many people, but that doesn't mean that nobody's reading Lord Byron or no one's reading Percy Shelley. So I feel like there's a fair few things coming up here that might be might be interesting. So I think I'm just going to go through the things that have got 100 ratings or less. There's also a few magazines here that I'm not going to include. There are also some like board books for children because I was originally intending on trying to track all of the books that I read with my niece. However, there are a lot of children's books in the world, so I stopped doing that. But I also don't feel like anybody's going to be particularly interested in my thoughts on Pussycat, Pussycat, What Can You See by Joe Lodge, which I'm sure is a fantastic children's book, but not of much interest to anybody else. So the book on my Goodreads shelf, which has the lowest number of ratings, is actually this book, Shakespeare Politics, which is a collection of essays around Shakespeare and politics. It is edited by Catherine M.S. Alexander, and yeah, basically I had this from university. I actually did a couple of Shakespeare courses during my history degree and they were really, really interesting, using Shakespeare's plays more as like a primary source rather than digging really deep into the language. So we've got Henry VIII and the Deconstruction of History, we've got Livy, Machiavelli and Shakespeare's Coriolanus, we've got Richard II and the Realities of Power, Julius Caesar and the Politics of Theatrical Representation, and yeah, just a lot of different things. I'm not surprised that this has a low number of ratings because it is more of an academic book, but it's a Shakespeare essay collection. I'd have thought at least a few more people than 3 would have read it. But do highly recommend it if you are at all into the academic side of studying Shakespeare. Next up, a book that I am not at all surprised to see has only got 4 ratings on Goodreads is Walpole's Queen of Comedy, which is the biography of Elizabeth Farren by Suzanna Bloxam. Yeah, I knew that this was a niche interest of mine. In fact, this isn't even in print anymore. I had to do a lot of digging to pick this up. This is a biography of Elizabeth Farren, who was an actress in the 18th century. She was fairly successful. She did quite a few plays, including Shakespeare and School for Scoundrels, but she's probably most well known for the fact that she had an affair with and ended up marrying the Earl of Derby. And I first became interested in Elizabeth Farren during my master's programme. I did a module on representing women in the 18th century and looking at different texts and images from the 18th century. And I came across this Gilray caricature of Elizabeth Farren and the Earl of Derby, and I decided to write an essay on it because I thought it was so interesting. Maybe something I'll talk a little bit more about if I ever get around to doing that video about what I studied at university. But it was something I found really interesting. So when I knew that this was like the one and only biography of Elizabeth Farren and nobody else has written about her, I was just like, well, I want to know. I want to know. Let's see what else is next. We have 30-second economics, the 50 most thought-provoking economic theories, each explained in half a minute, which I actually think is in my DNF pile. Not my DNF pile, my unhaul pile. So this is the 30-second economics. I basically picked this up when I was doing work experience at Icon Books. And yeah, does what it says on the tin, just gives like little introductions to economic theories. I know nothing about the economy or finance, so I was like, well, maybe this might get me into it. Spoilers, it didn't. Once again, an example of books which are definitely not niche books, definitely books that other people have read, but because of the edition it seems to have lower ratings. Also on here is the New International Version of the Bible. The Bible, that niche book that no one's read. We also have a book called Love Your Plot, Gardens Inspired by Nature, which is a book about gardening, which I proofread as part of publishing work experience that I did, and for some reason decided to log it onto Goodreads because I was like, well, I've read it. Another book where it is literally just the edition of it, doesn't have many people reading it on Goodreads and rating it, is the Agnes Grey edition that I have. This is by Arcturus Press. Oh, this one's slightly more interesting. With only 24 ratings on Goodreads, we have The Faber Book of Christmas, which I am surprised by, but then I'm also not, because I feel like I've seen a lot of people picking this up because it's such a beautiful thing. It's got a Liberty of London print on it. But then I do imagine that there are a lot of people who've picked this up because it's so pretty, but maybe haven't read it. And yet this is just another little anthology of Christmas stories and Christmas poems. I'm a big fan of Christmas books, so I had to pick this up when I saw it, and it's just a lovely little thing to have. Back onto my academic history non-fiction, a book that only has 24 ratings on Goodreads is this, The Gender of Death, A Cultural History in Art and Literature. I don't know why not many people want to read this. So at some point when I was trying to decide what I wanted to do for my masters, I was kind of hovering between doing early modern history and doing public history. I ended up doing public history, but I was considering talking about this topic about the personification of death, because for some reason I have a morbid fascination with death and how it is presented and people's attitudes to death. And the personification of death, at least I think in Britain and the United States, is usually depicted as male. However, there are many, many countries in which death is usually personified as a woman. And I just thought that was interesting and I wanted to read more about this. Actual fact, some of this was kind of interesting and a lot of it was kind of dry. So I didn't end up doing this for my dissertation overall, but you know, good to have. We have a classic FM musical miscellany. Where's that? So if you're at all interested in classical music, this will be like a nice little introduction for you. Why can't the books that I've read be like cool? Back onto the academic history train, we've got Early Modern England, a social history from 1550 to 1760 by James Sharpe. And in actual fact, this was one of my lecturers for my second year of undergrad. So I guess I have to say that it's good. This is literally just a social history of England. So we've got politics and society, we've got population, family life, towns and villages, the national community and the problem of order, the economy, the landed orders, the non-landed elites, the common people, religion, education and literacy, which is the main thing that I was interested in, culture, popular and elite, magic, witchcraft and natural philosophy, and politics and society again. This was probably the book that made me realise that I do not care at all about the 17th century. It all began here. This is a really good academic text to pick up if you are at all interested in particularly the 17th century, but once again, I just like to pretend that the 17th century doesn't exist. I just don't care about the English Civil War. I don't mean it. I do care about the English Civil War. I just have no interest in going really in depth into it. I'm happy to know that it happened and how it influenced the other time periods that I'm interested in, but I just don't want to learn about it. Next up, with under 100 ratings, I might as well just get the entire collection that I own and show you. It is the Penguin Food editions. Now, these were originally a set of 20, and I did have all 20, but at some point when I was doing declutterings, I just decided to keep the ones I'd actually read. But these are all just different food writings from the past like 500 years. So we've got Hannah Glass, we've got Gervase Markham, Brulette Severin, that's probably not how you pronounce that, Charles Lamb, my favourite title, which is Dissertation upon Roast Pig, Isabella Beeton, Alexandre Dumas, Claudia Rodin, and Alice Waters. They also had a Samuel Pepys one, which I cannot believe I got rid of. But it was actually this series of books that inspired me to do my undergrad dissertation, which was all about 18th century cookbooks, and particularly the portrayal of the housewife. So once again, cannot believe that I got rid of most of these books, and now you can't even get these anymore, at least not cheap. Ooh, with only 43 and 55 ratings, we have two books that if you have been watching my channel, you definitely will have heard of. Both of my fashion history books are there. So we have Tudor Fashion by Eleri, Lynn, and then Dress in the Age of Jane Austen, which is by Hilary, Davidson. My two favourite periods. Once again, not at all surprised that these have low ratings and that not many people have picked them up, because they, you know, it's dress history, it's maybe, I don't know, maybe that is a little bit more niche for some people, but I just love both of these so much. So if you are at all interested, read them. On a similar vein, another illustrated history is Georgiana's World, the illustrated Georgiana, Duchess of Devonshire. Now, this is by Amanda Foreman, and the traditional biography of Georgiana, Duchess of Devonshire is a very well-known biography. However, this edition is basically the exact same thing. It is the same biography, same words and everything, but it has images. And I strongly believe that all history books should come illustrated. Like, it's so good. I just feel like seeing illustrations and primary sources and pamphlets and paintings and everything, it just brings history to life so much more. And I know it makes it more expensive to produce, but I think in terms of getting more people into history, it's worth it. That's just my opinion. Oh, a book that I'm glad has got low ratings. Let me get it from my unhaul pile. This book, which I've still not managed to be able to properly unhaul, but it's there, it's on the unhaul pile. This is probably the worst book that I have ever read. This is What We Do by Tom Hansen. This, once again, is a book that I read when I was doing work experience, and I don't know why I kept it. I think, especially at the time, I was very much like, I will keep every single book that I have ever read. Stupid. But this is kind of like a crime thriller kind of thing, and I don't really even remember the plot of it. I just remember that it was awful. All of the bad, like, crime thriller stereotypes with, like, a bit of hipster thrown in and, like, some really gratuitous drugs and sexual violence. Sorry. Another poetry collection that is on this list with 61 ratings is the Forward Book of Poetry for 2018. That was when I was trying to get more into modern poetry. Didn't really work for me. I feel like I'm much more into, like, classic poets, or at least poets who like to work in traditional rhyme and meter. I'm not a big fan of free verse, and I learnt that whilst reading that. So, you know, glad that I have it. Glad that I read it. We've got Studying History, which is this, another classic staple of the BA history curriculum. If you're wanting to be a history student, then read this. It's a very good introduction. I mean, you can't cite it in your essays or anything, but it's still useful, I think. It just gives you an introduction to the different varieties of history, how history has kind of changed over the decades, how to use secondary and primary sources, different theories and concepts, and then also gives you advice on, like, essay writing and writing good dissertations. So, highly recommend. Oh god, it's another history book. Where's it gone? We've got Public History Essays from the Field, edited by James B. Gardner and Peter S. Paglia. I don't know. Another introduction to my degree topic, yay! So when I knew that I was going to be doing my MA in public history, I decided to just get whatever public history books that I could, and yeah. Interesting. Very good introduction to the topic, though just basic, every single essay in here just kind of begin with traditional historians don't think that public history is a real thing and they don't treat us well and we are just as valid a history as any other history. And it's like, great, thanks, this is what I'm getting myself into. Because there's a whole thing in traditional academia that says that public historians aren't real historians, and it's like, oh, fine. Ugh. You know, because we deal with the public rather than an archive, and it's meant to be seen as reductionist history or whatever. Shh. Oh, a book that people might have actually heard of. Yay! Where's it gone? Okay. We have this! We have Rife, 21 Stories from Britain's Youth, edited by Nikesh Shukla and Sammy Jones. You have probably heard of Nikesh Shukla because he edited The Good Immigrant. He is also the head of the Good Literary Agency, which really works to help support underrepresented literary voices. And this kind of does what it says on the tin. It is 21 essays written by people under the age of 25, which makes me feel very, very old. 21 powerful and passionate essays from writers under the age of 24. I'm not a young person anymore! Essays on money, mental health, sex, gender equality, education, crime and the future. Bracing, honest and set against what can often seem an apocalyptic backdrop, they offer essential insights into what it means to be young in Britain today. Yeah, I really thought this was interesting. As with any essay collection, there are going to be some essays that will resonate a little bit more than others, and I'd be very, very interested in seeing like an essay collection like this, but like a year from now, especially with right now in the background, because sadly I cannot think that anything will really have improved after this horrible year. Once again, another example of how a particular edition of poetry might be a little bit underrepresented on Goodreads, but that doesn't mean that nobody's reading them. I also have Robert Graves' poetry and Wilfred Owen. This came in a little set of World War I poets. I highly doubt that nobody is reading either of these two authors, it's just that these specific editions may not get as much love. And then finally, the last book on my Goodreads shelf, which has got less than 100 ratings, and guess what? It's another history book, yay! This is The Beau Monde by Hannah Gregg, Fashionable Society in Georgian London. This is one of my favourite history books of all time. Love it very much. As it suggests, it is all about the fashionable elite in 18th century Georgian London. Obviously, because it is academic history, I feel like that's why less people have picked it up. But I feel like this is one that could be like a really good introduction for academic history because it's written in a very accessible way. At least that's what I think. And also, worth bearing in mind, because this is actually coming out into paperback, I think, next month. Yes, I've just checked. It is the 12th of November this is coming out into paperback. I'll be really interested to see if there's going to be any like supplementary material, maybe another introduction or something, or I don't know, any extra stuff that she might have put in, because this originally came out in 2013. But yeah, Hannah Gregg is one of my favourite historians. She was originally the convener on my public history course, so she wasn't the year that I ended up studying. She is known for being a historical consultant. She was a consultant on Poldark, on the Duchess, Gunpowder. She was a consultant on The Favourite. Yeah, she's just done a bunch of really interesting things. So one of my favourite academic historians. So yay, those are all of the books that have under 100 ratings on my Goodreads account. I hope you're still watching this. I hope you didn't click off after the first book and think, nope, not for me. Yeah, like I say, it's a lot of academic history, maybe some stuff that people wouldn't have necessarily found and picked up for themselves, but maybe it was interesting to you, I don't know. Or at the very least just shone a little bit of light into the kind of things that I like to read and the kind of things that I had to read for university as well. Thank you to Grace for originally giving me the inspiration to doing this video. I'd love to hear from you any books that have particularly low ratings on your Goodreads that you think should have so many more people reading them. Let me know, I'd love to hear from you. I hope you are having a fantastic, fantastic day and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks.